I want to bring in my next guest, though. I am joined with the man himself, Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof, there we are. Michael Maloof is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service experience in the U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, how you doing, my man? Can you hear me okay?
Great. I'm good. Thank you.
You're perfectly fine. Good. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad you joined me on this. I have a tendency on this show to get other people's opinions, especially before I crystallize my own take.
I don't know about that.
Well, I do get other people's opinions. You'd be surprised. I ask people the same question over and over again because I want to get their takes. And sometimes they have very different, divergent takes on some of these things. Trump's Putin phone call has just taken place. Now, I think I said before the phone call took place that nothing was going to happen in that phone call, that there was no bridging the gap between where Ukraine is and where Russia is, and that a lot of the stuff is influence management, trying to get Trump to believe that they want something that they don't necessarily want, meaning I don't believe for a moment that Ukraine wants peace. Russia may want a deal, but it's never going to be on U.S. terms, considering the fact that they are winning the conflict and they have effectively won the war. But you have to deal with Trump, because if he passes more sanctions or if he decides to get more involved, it will be easier for Russia if Trump just walks away. One of the interesting things in Axios is Axios points out that Europe was shocked completely at Donald Trump's phone call when he contacted them after the fact. And one of the parts is Trump points out, he says, Trump told the group that Russia and Ukraine should conduct bilateral direct negotiations without any third-party mediators because the parties best understand the details of the conflict. Effectively, you all need to stay out. We need to stay out, and we need to let them work this out. Okay, well, that's effectively just Istanbul again, in what Russia wanted in the first place. Medvedev came out and said, look, this is your last chance. You can either surrender, or you can come to peace terms, or you can capitulate. There is no two other options. There is no other door in what's going to happen right now. Give me a take on this. I mean, do you think that ultimately Ukraine will be dragged to the negotiation table, or do you think that no, Zelensky has no room to maneuver? Whatever it is in his mind, he is forced into the position that he is in, either by the Europeans or, for that matter, by the banderites that are in his government. If he signs a document, he will be strung up on a lamppost in Kiev. Give me your take on this so far. Just I'm providing context, but give me a take on these talks and everything else around it.
Well, the Europeans still want war. There's no question about it.
Yeah,
they just agreed to take some more of the frozen Russian assets to send off to Ukraine for war. Zelensky, on the other hand, is caught between the proverbial rock and hard place. He's under pressure from Trump to at least negotiate something. But at the same time, as you point out, he's got a gun to his head from his own people, and he's caught between the rock and hard place. Putin can wait it out. I think what shocked the Europeans is that Trump did not institute sanctions against Russia. He has no intention of doing that anyway. I knew that before he went into the discussion with Putin, simply because, as I pointed out earlier, that Trump wants a far greater geostrategic arrangement with Russia to deal with other issues apart from Ukraine. But he needs Russia's cooperation. Plus, he respects power, and he's now regards. And I said this on Sputnik in a published article the other day that he wants he recognizes Putin and Russia generally as a strategic equal, and that's really critical for the Russians, and they respect that, and that's really going to be important. So, notwithstanding whatever is the outcome with Ukraine, he's going to proceed. The Europeans cannot do anything because they don't have the infrastructure to on their own independently. They always caveat, we're going to give you all this aid and all this military assistance with U.S. backing. Well, that is not going to be forthcoming. And I think Trump, and particularly JD, has made that very clear. So we're at a interims. We're in a state of flux here, and waiting for the next shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the agreement for them to get together. Trump agreed to with Putin that the next thing is a memorandum of understanding on what the terms should be for so-called ceasefire. Even Putin came back and said ceasefire, recognizing that he said never a ceasefire because that'll give Ukraine a chance to rearm. Well, that isn't going to happen either because the Europeans don't have the capability. So, as you point out, Putin is really in the driver's seat on this, and he's going to continue pushing this along. He knows he just saw, as a result of that phone call, that Trump is not going to bring the hammer down on him. Now, what could happen is that he'll come to his arrangement with Putin, but the Europeans may not. And if they do anything counter to whatever is negotiated between Zelensky and Putin, they're on their own. Yeah. I think Zelensky, because of the agreement he now has with the United States on mineral rights, is going to be forced to at least sit down and work out something. But you have to have the teams to come up with the terms. You don't in a negotiation, you don't start off with your principles. You get your teams to come together and come to terms, and then the principles come together and anoint it. Yeah. And that's really the proper approach in any diplomatic negotiation. And that's what's occurring now. Putin basically put the whole thing back on track, and Trump readily agreed to that without sanctions. So we're watching the implementation of a process. It's going to take longer. And I would add that just yesterday or this morning, Zelensky fired off a bunch of drones toward Moscow, and they all got shot down. So and Putin immediately reported that to Trump.
Yeah, he apparently reported also that he was putting those world leaders in danger at the victory parade. And to be clear,
but he was persuaded not to.
Yeah. So what Putin said was a ceasefire if appropriate agreement is reached.
Right.
All of it is qualified.
Everything is qualified. Yes, and he has good reason to be that way because he saw what happened right after Minsk II, where there was basically a ceasefire. But at that time, Zelensky kept bombarding Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Mm-hmm. And what most Americans do not realize is that since 2014, Kyiv has been bombarding and shelling the eastern part of their own country for 8 years. For 8 years at that time, before the SMO, special military operation, began in February of 2022. People don't know that generally because it's not reported by the Western press. But as we've seen on Sputnik, on RT, we would see the daily feeds out of the videos of the bombardments that were going on. And at some points, Zelensky would go and visit the front in these declared autonomous regions. Mm-hmm. And yet the Western press would not pick that up. So the West, and particularly Americans, just thought, one day Putin woke up one morning and said, I think I'll go and invade Ukraine. No, it didn't work. That wasn't the case. There's a history, and people who don't know their history are going to be condemned to relive it.
Agreed. 1,000% agree with you. It's amazing to me.
That's depressing.
It is. Well, it's amazing the way the media is cut. Well, the media is cut here a very specific way. I was PBS. Oh God, this was a few months ago, and he said something to the effect of, "Russia invaded. Putin is a war for no reason, effectively. And that was their news bit. Like when they were describing the very end of kind of like a summary of how this started. And it's like, are you serious? That's your summary of how this began? I
Yeah.
mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah, it's all propaganda, and I don't want to recite recent history, but up until December of 2021, Putin was sending diplomatic warnings to the Biden White House and to the State Department, and they were all poo-pooed. They were being the Americans were talking down to the Russians, unconcerned about the red lines that Putin was describing. And I know he made numerous démarches or diplomatic presentations to that effect, that this was really affecting our security. The fact that you still want Ukraine to join NATO, even though they profess to remain non-aligned, either from joining Western or Eastern defense alliances. And actually, it's in their proclamation to become an independent country back in 1991. So there was violent, and they were being, and what was happening was that Zelensky was being encouraged to do this from Boris Johnson of the UK at the time when he was prime minister, and Victoria Nuland, and of course the Biden administration of Blinken. So the history is there. The Americans just don't know it. And so there was warning, because Putin once said, look, we're Russia. We are where we are. We can't go anywhere. Yet you have NATO encroaching through expansion on us. And, we gave up the Warsaw Pact in 1991. So why are you doing this? And it all stems from the neocon ideology that was coming out of Washington and embraced by the allies, the NATO allies, so long as Washington was paying the bill. And now we're seeing all of that change under Trump. Trump wants NATO to go up to 5% of their own GNP, or we're not either not going to protect you, or you can get out. And I think that once Trump comes to some arrangement with Putin on the bilateral terms, you'll notice that the Europeans have been cut out. I think that if the Europeans want to do something on their own, they're going to get squashed, and the United States is not going to get involved. And I think, when you look back, and we see a pattern of behavior over at least the last 2 centuries, that we're always fighting European wars.
Yes.
The Europeans are fighting among themselves, and then now, from World War I and II, the United States intervened to help bail them out. But on the other hand, we can't continue doing that.
But see, some people will make the argument, and I think I would even make this argument, so I'm not going to just say some people, that what Donald Trump is doing is not disengaging. He's not going with this idea of a multipolar world. He's going with a new hegemonic model where there's a diversification of resources, where he wants to diversify resources to the Pacific while allowing Europe to diversify resources to Europe. I mean, basically, look, we need you to build up militaries, kind of like what the Romans did, right? Where the Romans are like, all right, we've expanded so far, and we don't have the manpower in order to do what we want to do. So let's bring in these quote unquote barbarians, and let's add these barbarians to our ranks, to expand our ranks. The barbarians in this case will be Europe. We need Europe now to take over a large share of the responsibility of dealing with that continent for us, meaning they're still our vassals. And even Donald Trump saying, hey, we need you to increase your amount to 5%. But that's not the U.S. necessarily disengaging. That's the U.S. effectively militarily disengaging while still maintaining control over the way Europe effectively functions and operates.
Well, fighting for the United States, whatever little ancient feuds that the Europeans continue to harbor, It's not a threat to the United States. That's because of the new mindset that Trump has introduced about America first. Is it in our national interest? Is it a threat to the United States? That's why I don't regard Iran, for example, as a threat to the United States. It isn't.
Right.
It might be a threat to the bases we put out there. Well, get them out. We don't need them over there. Let the Middle Eastern countries deal with their own damn problems. Let them stew in their own juices. But what Trump is introducing here is a brushed off new spheres of influence type of approach. It's sort of a pseudo multipolar approach, but with a recognition of power bases of elites with Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
These, he recognizes and respects power. That's where he wants to deal with. You see him doing this also with Erdogan, and he's going to be doing it with Kim Jong-un. These are, again, they're looked upon as autocrats, but that's what you need to deal with power politics on the international scale when you're dealing with these people. They respect power, and he recognizes that. That's why you have the peace through strength. But just because you have the strength doesn't mean you go out and flaunt it and invade every place and spread your hegemony everywhere and use cutouts to undermine other governments and have regime change everywhere. Those days, hopefully, will be over.
Speaking of that, and I'm glad you mentioned that, new intelligence suggests Israel is preparing a possible strike on Iranian nuclear facilities, U.S. officials say. Now, I will take the position that Israel is not a rogue actor, that Israel is a proxy of the United States, one of those cutouts that you just mentioned, and that they would never do that without the consent of the United States. And I would even go further. All of this chum that has been put into the press of Trump and Israel has a rift, or Trump tells Israel, hey, it's kind of bad that you're starving 2 million people, after a week before going to the ICJ arguing that Israel has the right to starve 2 million people. Like, even all of the European vassals coming out saying, hey, we don't like the fact that Israel is starving all of these people, when beforehand they had no issue with Israel starving all of these people. All of this stuff is chum added to the water to create distance between the U.S., or for that matter, these European countries, and Israel, knowing what they're about to do with Iran. So they could say, our hands aren't on it. For the last hour and a half, we complained that we didn't like the fact that Israel was starving 2 million people. Even Donald Trump's thing, where Israel, this stuff is a scheme. Donald Trump has already stated the quiet part out loud. Netanyahu has already said the quiet part out loud, that they're trying to put these people into concentration camps with this notion of kicking them out of the country in some sort of way. And Donald Trump has effectively agreed using this humanitarian rationale, despite the fact that we're paying 80% of them to commit that genocide. So give me your take on this. Rogue actor, or they're doing this without expressed knowledge?
Well, I think Netanyahu is turning into a rogue actor in this. He's having to yield to his internal pressures through Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, in order to keep his government in power. And Smotrich just the other day talked about how you need to starve all the Palestinians, kick them all out. He's basically resorting back to the old messianic concept of taking back or recreating a so-called greater Israel that they envisioned from the biblical times. That and Trump, as you know, was just in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has a different outlook on things. And I think if Trump wants Saudi Arabia, UAE to continue paying in, and also to be his golden parachute once he leaves office, because he's not going to run again. Obviously, he cannot. Yeah. He's going to yield to their needs and their outlook. And then for the first time, you're actually hearing Trump talk about the Palestinians. Before, they were just people in the way. Let's feed them, And he also has family members who are putting pressure on him that you cannot continue to have these kids starving. And Netanyahu just doesn't care. Now, what Netanyahu may attempt to do is limited bombing of nuclear sites. If he does that, as Trump is trying to come to an arrangement with the Iranians, I think it's going to piss him off even more, because he says we almost have a deal. The issue there is over the question of percentage of uranium.
No. That's not the issue. It's enrichment.
It's one of the issues.
It's enrichment in and of itself. I can show you the clips of Witkoff.
Yeah.
I can show you the clips of Trump, where Witkoff has expanded what they wanted. Initially, it was, how much are we going to enrich? And then it became, we need the Libyan model going forward.
They are signatories to the NPT. They are entitled, under proper international supervision, to enrich and to have a legitimate nuclear development program. They are allowed to do that. Right. And that, I think this is once again where Trump will need Putin to help come in, because Russia has designs on helping to build those reactors for the future in Iran, and you need enrichment. And even if they, I know somebody said the red line is 1%, no more than 1%. Well, it was agreed in JCPOA to 3%. So, come on. And even the Iranians are saying it's totally unrealistic now. We've moved on. And I think if they can allow up to 20%, and the Iranians have suggested that they are prepared to cut back, but they are entitled to a legitimate nuclear development program. And if we have an opportunity here to open up, not only to allow the Russians to oversee and help police that, because they would build a reactor, but the United States could also assist the Iranians in that nuclear development program, as they do with the Saudi nuclear development program, which they are really keen on doing, because they want to, diversify their economies for the future. 2030 is part of it. This is all part of the 2030 project with Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of things swirling around here in this mix that can come together in a way that we sort of walk a nice tight line, be of assistance, economic assistance that allows us influence as a consequence, and it lessens the prospect of confrontation and war as a result.
But and I know both.
That's my formula.
This has nothing to do with nukes. This has nothing to do with nuclear power.
No, it doesn't. And the Iranians don't really have the means. Okay, if they could, they have the technical. They are a threshold country. They have the infrastructure to build a bomb. Can they deliver it? Can they miniaturize? Now, if it push turns to shove, I think this is where the North Koreans could certainly assist, and even the Pakistanis. They could lend Iran a few nukes if they really need them to put them on the missiles. They have that capability. There is a long history of cooperation between, notwithstanding their differences on Islam, between Pakistan and Iran. But they have had a history of cooperation, particularly in the military field, and certainly the North Koreans do as well. In fact, it was the North Koreans that helped develop the Iranian missile program in the first place.
Really? I did not know that.
Beginning with Scud Seas. Yeah, beginning with Scud Seas. How did North Korea become a net exporter of missile technologies in the 90s? They got it originally from the Egyptians and reverse engineered.
Go ahead. This history is fascinating to me. Like, just the inner workings of how this stuff gets.
This is how it evolved. Yeah. People think, well, where did the North Koreans get the know-how for missiles? Well, they got it from the Egyptians originally, and they developed the Scud Sea as a consequence. They also developed the means, and this is where my people came involved. We actually figured out where the North Koreans were getting very specialized steel to house the nitric acid as fuel, not nitric oxide fuel,
Yeah.
for liquid fuel, to be on standby for over a year without having to fill up and show and give a lot of indications and warning. They could shoot them off very, very quickly. And we figured it out where that steel was coming from. We knew they didn't have an indigenous capability. We knew they were not getting it from the Chinese. They were getting it from Japan.
Japanese steel. Japanese steel.
It was Mitsubishi steel.
Yeah.
It had titanium incorporated, infused into the steel, but it was not under any export controls, and that's why they could readily get it. There's a strong relationship between the Japanese and the North Koreans, called the Chosen Soren. They're like into their 5th or 6th generation, going way back to World War II, and before. So and you have North Korean businesses in Japan that, for all intents and purposes, are regarded as Japanese, but they're really North Korean fronts.
Korean. Go ahead. Oh, this is like Kill Bill, Japanese steel. Like it's the special brand of.
It was specialized steel. In fact, I have a little plaque. It took my people 6 months to figure it out. We had the people down at the missile group down at Huntsville actually do the tests on the steel. We were able to abscond with a Scud C and actually do tests on the steel, and that's where we found how they actually were holding that nitric oxide in their missiles ready to launch. And we saw it. We also saw it in Iraq during the Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and
looking at the mineral content that's in the product in order to figure out what's in it.
Yeah.
And there it is, titanium.
That's what my people did. It took them 6 months to figure it out, and it has never really been broadly broadcast. But our group did this, and we actually were given at that time a classified award by the Secretary of Defense.
Are you serious? Wait a minute, a classified award? Oh, so nobody publicized the fact that they gave you an award for figuring. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh yeah, because we were able to figure out how they could be on ready alert and do it so quickly. We couldn't figure it out. We couldn't figure out where they were getting the steel, and I had my group, my people took 6 months for us to break it all down.
Wait, so why did they they classified it because they didn't want any other country to know where the steel was coming from either,
or that we even knew about it.
Secrecy among secrecy, just piled on each other. Oh my, that's fascinating. You have worked in a fascinating job. Like, just to put it mildly.
I've had my version of experiences, yeah.
Yeah. Michael, man, thank you for that.
I wouldn't trade them for anything.
They sound fascinating, and I would imagine a lot of that stuff is classified where you can't even talk about, but still fascinating nonetheless. I'm always fascinated when I'm talking to people who are behind the veil and the things that they've done behind that veil. But
it's based on that basic Scud C technology on which the Iranians then went solid fuel and developed their missile tech program, again with North Korean help. So that line of assistance is long-standing, and if the Iranian, to get back to the original point, the Iranians really wanted to go nuclear, they could, but they're not. So we got, and I know people say, even though the supreme leader has launched 2 fatwas against going nuclear weapons, well, he has, and he's the supreme leader. That is the last word in that culture, and they respect it.
I know
we don't, because we say, oh yeah, they'll just go ahead and do it anyway. They don't.
Oh yeah, because we're cynical about stuff like that.
And our own intelligence community says that the last indicator that they had of any nuclear weapons development program was back in 2003, which was stopped, notwithstanding what Netanyahu was yelling about.
Correct. Now bake that into the cake for a moment, because I want you to see it through my eyes. all of that's given for me. And if all of that's given for me, then the dishonesty of the way that we're talking about it, that doesn't give you pause about motive. Like in the way that we were looking at Iraq, and we said, what, Iraq is weapons of mass destruction of Iraq. And we knew that they did.
When it comes to governments, I have a saying, you never, I don't care which side is which, especially our side, having been in the system, you never can mistrust them enough.
That's my point. Like if they're lying for a reason.
Yes, they have motives.
Yes.
They're ulterior motives. There are ulterior motives. It isn't
what would be the ulterior motive?
Nothing is ever clear cut.
Right. And what would be the ulterior motive to lie about them having or trying to create a nuke? If not
in order to conquer, for regime change ultimately.
Exactly. So that's the lens through which I see it. They did the same thing with Iraq, the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They knew they were lying. And now, lo and behold, their weapons of mass destruction.
And they did it to Libya. Even though we got Libya to pull back, that gave us an entree to invade. And that's why North Korea said, we're not going to be another Libya. Even the Russians objected to us going into Libya back when we did that. Forget the year.
Looking at Iran, and we're using a similar argument for Iran, that doesn't give you a sense that they're trying to do the same thing to Iran to justify attacks on Iran or regime change
they
on
are.
Iran?
They are. It's history repeating itself, just in a different country, different time.
But you just don't believe that Trump wants it. That you have people around him who want it, but Trump himself wants something else. I see. Okay. That makes more sense. Okay. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, you still have the neocons there that want to pulverize the place and have regime change. But I've seen what the Iranian opposition looks like, and they suck. They can't get their own little act together. They're all they want to form another elite group. Well, they're just going to become their own autocrats once again. So I see down the line what would be a replacement. Let's say conceivably they could replace the mullahs, which and the supreme leader, which is not. You got to distinguish in Iran between Islam and the supreme leader versus the government.
Right.
The Iranian people like their supreme leader and be run by the clergy. They don't like the government, the way it's being run and being kept down. So there's a distinction, and the supreme leader ultimately could replace the president overnight if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And he has.
Michael Maloof, my man. Mike, thank you for this, man. I always appreciate you joining me. I really do. Michael Maloof, he is a former senior security policy analyst and Office of Secretary of Defense, author, and a regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service experience in the U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, man, you have a fantastic day. Thank you for this.
You too, Jamal. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. You have a good one.